Hello and welcome to Daybreak, reaching you from Nigeria's capital, Abuja, and right here on Trust Television. I am Ayuba Ilya. Of course, as always, not alone. Good morning, Husseina.
Good morning, Ayuba. It's good to see you, and it's good to be here with you.
Yeah, you too.
It happens once in a while, but it's always a pleasure, having to share the show with you.
Of course.
How's your week been?
Well, it's been quite interesting. A lot going on, really, but some excitement as well as far as our fight against insecurity is concerned.
Definitely.
We are getting the story about the 23 remaining passengers of the Abuja-Kaduna train. Yes, and then of course certain operations by our military forces that seem to be yielding results, and so quite commendable.
So, yeah, this week has been filled with so many positive stories, and I just hope from today it continues week in, week out. It continues to be nothing but positivity.
Yeah, sustain the momentum.
Yes,
very critical at this time.
All right, so with this, we'll move on to the highlights at this hour. 3 children escaped from kidnappers' den in Abuja.
Woman nabbed for beating 3-year-old to death, dumps body in bush in Anambra.
Ensure free, fair and credible elections, Khan tells INEC.
All right, let's take a look at the details. 3 teenage Fulani boys abducted by bandits at Gwanda in Gurdi Ward of Abaji Area Council of Abuja have escaped after their abductors slept off. Daily Trust reports that Gwanda is about a kilometer away from neighboring Gulida village in the area. The councillor representing Gurdi Ward, Wazoe Ishaya, who confirmed the kids' escape to our reporter on telephone on Thursday, said the victims were abducted on Tuesday night. He said that the bandits invaded the Fulani settlement in the community around 11 p.m. and whisked away the 3 boys, whom he said are 12, 14 and 16 years old respectively. He said bandits also took away some rams to their den and slaughtered them. The district head of Gulida, Abubakar Sardona, who also confirmed the incident, decried bandit attacks on the community. The spokesperson for the FCT Police Command, DSP Ade Josephine, is yet to reply to a text message sent to her about the development.
Away from that story, a woman who beat a 3-year-old girl under her care to death in Amikwa, Oka South local government area of Anambra State has been arrested. It was gathered that the woman allegedly beat the child to death and dumped her corpse in the bush. In a viral video, the body of the dead girl was found in a bush in Amikwa, Oka. According to the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, Anambra Command, the woman is being arrested and she has confessed to the crime. Confirming the incident or the arrest, the spokesman of Anambra State Command, DSP Ikenga Tochukwu, said NAPTIP arrested the woman and handed her over to the police. Ikenga said that Mrs. Chinelo Dogu, who was suspected to have flogged a 3-year-old child to death and dumped her body in the bush, has been arrested. The PPRO also stated that the case has been transferred to the State Criminal Investigation Department for a discretionary investigation. The state police spokesman added that any further development on the issue will be communicated.
The Christian Association of Nigeria in the 19 northern states and the Federal Capital Territory has called on the Independent National Electoral Commission to ensure that the 2023 elections are free, fair and credible. The Christian body also called on President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure a peaceful transition at the end of his tenure in 2023, adding that it is the enduring legacy he will leave behind. This was disclosed in a communique signed by the chairman of the religious body, Reverend Yakubu Pam, and its Secretary General, Elder Sunday Oibe. It was issued after the group's National Executive Council meeting in Kaduna. According to the group, those who managed the economy are using hunger as a weapon as the 2023 general election approaches. The clergymen called on the government at all levels to address the problem of poverty and hunger in Nigeria. The group expressed deep concern about the prolonged strike by ASU, with a call on the university teachers and the federal government to resolve their differences in the best interest of the nation and the future of children. On security matters, Northern CAN commended the gallant military and other security agencies for the ongoing efforts to crush bandits, terrorists and other criminal elements unleashing mayhem on Nigerians, especially in the north. They also expressed happiness with the release of the remaining 23 abducted victims of the March 28th attack on the Abuja-Kaduna train passengers.
Well, with that story, we have wrapped up the highlights at this hour, and we'll move on to more stories, by the way. The Nigerian Labour Congress is staging a peaceful protest in solidarity with pensioners over their monthly deductions and non-payment of their benefits by the Kano government. Trust TV correspondent Idris Jibrin reports that the NLC says there are over 30,000 pensioners who are currently suffering from the monthly deduction, non-payment of gratuity and other benefits. The report.
These are retired workers under the Nigerian Union of Pensioners drawn from the 44 local government areas of Kano State out on the streets in protest of monthly deduction of their pension and non-payment of other benefits.
Pensioners in Kano State from both state and local government areas are suffering from monthly deductions as a result of non-payment of their 100% monthly pension since January 2021, barely 20 months at local government areas, and state pensioners since March 2021, 18 months. With no cogent reason and with no hope to overcome the situation, despite several attempts by the Kano State Pension Fund trustees and Office of the Head of Civil Service to overcome the situation. Knowing fully that pensioners in the state have not enjoyed any pension increase since 2013, despite the implementation of the minimum pension and new national minimum wage in the country.
According to the Nigerian Labour Congress, many retired workers who depend on their pension for survival have lost their lives in the face of high cost of living, among other disturbances. The pensioners are therefore asking for the state government to pay their outstanding retired workers gratuity and stop the unnecessary monthly deduction of their pension as contained by law.
From January 2021 to August 2022, local government pensioners were deducted the sum of 2,573,9,049.61 out of their legitimate monthly pension, with a minimum of 13% monthly shortfall payment per pensioner in the months of October 2021 and a maximum of 26.2% in February 2022. While from March 2021 to August 2022, the sum of 906,917,595 naira 71 kobo, with a minimum of 2% monthly payment shortfall in the month of September 2021 and maximum of 11.2% in August 2022 from the state pensioners' monthly entitlements.
Meanwhile, the state head of service who received the pensioners at the state government house says that Kano state government has over the years remained consistent in paying the pensioners and that the problem of pension deduction arise from the previous administration.
The issue of non-remittance of monthly pension contribution for both employee and employer started right from the era of the regime of Mala Ibrahim Shekau, and also it followed the successive regimes until today. The reason behind the non-remittance could be attributed to the fact that at various periods in time in the history of our state and the country, the nation has faced a number of financial challenges.
Be that as it may, pensioners like this man who collapsed during the protests are pleading with the state government to look into their situation by settling their outstanding benefits as soon as possible. Idris Jibrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
All right, now hundreds of flood victims in Wuroboki, a border community of Adamawa and Cameroon Republic, say that they are yet to receive any assistance from the government to help ameliorate the hardship occasioned by the flooding. The victims said that the floods have washed away their farm produce, houses and other properties worth millions of naira. Trust TV's Salis Lawan visited the border community and fastened this report.
Even before the flood disaster, the victims, majority of them widows and less privileged, said they could barely feed as a result of the border closure. Madam Abari Omaru is one of the widows and also a victim. Her husband died and left her with 12 children and grandchildren.
I have lost my 2 farms as a result of this flooding. As I speak to you, me, my children and grandchildren sleep outside because our house have been washed away. We find it difficult to feed ourselves. The little capital that I have, which I do petty trading, is no longer available.
Despite this and other challenges, they said government is yet to come to their aid. Our condition here is appealing. Flood rendered us harmless. My children no longer go to school because I cannot afford to pay for their school fees. I don't have capital to trade anymore. As you can see, we sleep outside as the result of the flood. We are appealing to the government to come to our aid and help us so that we can feed ourselves and take care of our domestic needs.
Sometimes I shed tears when I look at these children of mine and grandchildren because of our situation. We have no one to assist us since after the demise of my husband. This flood has just added more hardships to our initial predicament. We really need assistance.
Meanwhile, the Executive Secretary of the Adamawa State Emergency Management Agency, Mohammed Suleiman, has assured of assistance to flood victims across the areas affected. From Yola, Salis Lawan, Trust TV News.
Well, the issue of flood has actually become something to worry about.
Really worrisome.
This year's, flood disaster in Nigeria alone is
really
alarming.
worrisome. And if you look at the map, if you look at how the occurrences of the flood, is almost as if all the communities living along the riverbanks of the Niger and Benue River are the ones experiencing this, right from Adamawa up to Lokoja. And all that. And I feel like we're likely to hear more of this.
Yeah, even the government actually, issued that warning, and they told those with houses by the riverbanks to evacuate. But one question I'm actually asking is, where would they go to? Camps have actually been set up for some of them, but aside that, it was insecurity, just recently, and a lot of people who lived in communities like that moved to IDP camps. Now you have IDP camps, set up for those affected by flood, and relief materials being given to them.
Yeah, it's multifaceted, really. And for me, it's more worrisome when you look at some of the communities. This is not the first time. I mean, they've been having these experiences. Some of them almost every year.
Well, has it ever
they
been
have
this
these
bad?
experiences. Yes, so perhaps this time around is more devastating. And especially if you look at the fact that even the authorities have said it's even beyond the predictions that the magnitude that is being expected is much more than what we are having, right now. So it gets really worrisome, and it speaks to all the our responses to all the issues, the issue of the flooding. Again, if you hear about the release of water from Lado Dam in Cameroon and all that,
might
and
have contributed as
this
well.
is not, we are understanding that this is not the first time. So why exactly does it keep happening? And it doesn't look like we learn lessons from them each time they happen. It's really worrisome.
Well, we hope something is really done about this in time, before the next rains come around and causes more, havoc. Now let's move on to more stories. Nigeria has recorded a drastic drop in the cases of sea piracy since President Muhammadu Buhari launched the Deep Blue project in June last year. The Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, Bashir Jamo, said 34 incidents of piracy were recorded last year, but no attack on vessels has occurred this year. The NIMASA Director General updated newsmen at State House Abuja on the activities of the agency when he briefed them on Thursday. Kende Amodu reports.
The first thing that comes to mind when the DG of the agency that oversees Nigeria's maritime territory briefs is how safe are Nigerian waters. The DG's reply is very safe. He notes that piracy in the Gulf of Guinea has drastically reduced since the coming into effect of the Deep Blue project, and this has led to the delisting of Nigeria from the piracy red list of the International Maritime Bureau.
From the first quarter to date, we have never recorded one single accident or incident in our own territorial waters in terms of piracy attack. From last quarter of 2021 to date, over a year now, no single attack in our own territorial water. This led to the cancellation of the stigma placed on Nigeria as the most dangerous water and removed from the piracy list in March 2022.
This, he says, has largely contributed to the safety of the Gulf of Guinea, which accounts for 95% of global kidnappings at sea. The second question, of course, is what is Nigeria and especially the agency doing to stop the large-scale oil theft off the shores of Nigeria?
The Deep Blue project is, procured and commissioned to deal with the maritime-related crimes. And I made mention, as at the time of commissioning this project, we have priority to address the issue of piracy within and beyond our territorial waters. And we focus attention on that. Now that we succeeded to a large extent, we will now have to face the issue of oil theft.
If Nigeria continues to maintain the path of maritime safety, it could very well exit the list of countries which have to pay heavily on insurance before vessels visit their countries. To cap its operational achievements, NIMASA has improved contributions to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government from 31 billion naira in 2020 to about 37 billion naira in 2021. From State House Abuja, Kende Amodu, Trust TV News.
All right, now the Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja has adjourned till Friday, October 7th, to rule on an application the Academic Staff Union of Universities also filed to stay the execution of the ruling of the National Industrial Court, NIC, that ordered an end to its ongoing strike action. The three-man panel of the appellate court, led by Justice Hama Barka, said that it will also consider the merit in ASU's request for leave to file a comprehensive appeal to set aside the NIC ruling. Trust TV's Aisha Salihu has more on this.
The Academic Staff Union of Universities, through its legal representative Femi Falano, notified the appellate court of filing an application for permission to formally lodge an appeal against the interim injunction that directed the striking varsity lecturers to return to the classroom. Though ASU earlier filed its proposed 14th ground of appeal, however, going by the provisions of Section 243, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, leave of the appellate court will be required for such appeal to gain validity. ASU maintained that its proposed appeal against the NIC order was based on grounds of law as well as on grounds bordering on fundamental human rights. The union said it has, however, willing to withdraw the application for stay of execution to expedite the hearing and determination matter.
We said that we had joined issues on that matter. We had filed extensive written addresses, and it should be dismissed. So the honorable justices took all the applications. Of course, we raised several other issues, that his application was incompetent, he had approached the court with dirty hands, he had not evinced special circumstances and all that. We are saying it is not right to lock out our students who are not parties to this action while the matter is going on. We are also saying it is not right to lock down infrastructure. So much of investments that had been made in educational infrastructure several years, that we have been a nation for 8 months.
Representative of the federal government, James Igwe, opposed ASU's application, even as he urged the court to dismiss it for want of competence and jurisdiction, as striking lecturers were yet to obey the order of the industrial court that was made since September 21. On the creation of the Congress of Nigerian University Academics, Falano said the law does not recognize the newly created academic union.
We're going to file any moment from now. The law is clear on classification of trade unions. As far as the law is concerned today, there's only one union for all our members of academic staff in all Nigerian universities. Once a union has been recognized to represent a particular cadre of workers, you cannot have 2 or 3.
After the 3-man panel of the appellate court, led by Justice Hamma Barka, had listened to both sides, it adjourned the matter till Friday, October 7, for ruling. Aisha Salihu, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right, well, with that, we'll take a break, and when we come back, it'll be time for us to, review the papers. Do stick around.
But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. We have in the studio Nuruddin Abdallah, editor, 21st Century Chronicle, joining us to give perspectives to some of the stories. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah. All right, now let's take a look at the stories, beginning with Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The first story there, which is the lead story actually, says 23 freed train passengers reunite with families after meeting Buhari. President says security challenges have evolved. That's on the riders there. How Mamu sabotaged rescue efforts. We owe victims, families a debt, says the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila. Now, if you take a look at the other stories above the lead story, 13 dead, 12 missing in Zamfara canoe mishaps. Then you have PDP crisis, Rivers Assembly recognizes Omehia as ex-governor, seeks 600 million naira refund. Discordant tunes over sealing of Dangote cement in Kogi. And then you would have other stories. Well, the pictorial basically shows you the president during his meeting with the freed victims of the Abuja-Kaduna train attack. Beside that, meningitis kills 56 in 32 states of the FCT. Navy seeks partnership with Media Trust. NGX Group appoints Kweranga as chairman. These are the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust. Not forgetting the 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birnin Yauri still in captivity. This is 477 days. We still have one student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 450 days still in captivity.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Leadership Friday. Yes, on Leadership Friday, we have the lead story that says travelers, residents stranded as flood grounds Lokoja. We have riders that say north cut off from south, economic activity stalled, oil marketers blame fuel scarcity on situation, FRSC advises commuters to take alternate routes Suleja Bida Mokwa Road for southwest, Nasarawa Oweto Adoka Otukpa axis for southeast travelers. We also have more stories. After 12 days in London, Tinubu returned to Nigeria. And then just below the pictorial there, we'll fight for full return of $5 billion Abacha loot, says PMB. We also have Eid el-Maulud, FJ declares Monday public holiday. Man condemns attack, Kogi threatens to recover cement company. And then 2023 campaign finance, INEC invokes 50,000 Naira donation limit. And these are some of the stories, on Leadership Friday.
All right, on the Nigerian Tribune this morning, the lead story says, twist and turns in Wike's Rivers. The writer says, Assembly derecognizes Omehia as ex-governor, orders him to refund 696.5 million naira within 7 days. Government to assent document today. Government withdraws criminal charges against Amechi and Koli, and that's among others. You have other stories there that says Nigeria has received over 2,000 military fighting equipment in 7 years. That's according to President Muhammadu Buhari. You have other stories beside the pictorial. FG ASU consultation for out-of-court settlement fails. Court to rule on ASU's application today. Zamfara government agrees to pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. Youths protest in Ibadan over EFCC arrest. I think these are the major stories on the Tribune this morning.
All right, up next is This Day newspaper. At the top of the page there, you have Dangote cement closure. Man berates Kogi government, says action illegitimate, anti-business. A writer here says state says no payment was paid, vows to recover company. We have CBN, 2.10 trillion naira disbursed to 426 projects under real sector facility. We also have below the nameplate, Wike set to assent motion stripping Omehia of former governor title. And writers here says lawmakers order Omehia to refund 696 million naira benefit. Rivers withdraws criminal suit against Amechi, call others. The lead story here talks about Buhari meets 23 freed Kaduna train victims, charges service chiefs to replicate success. We have writers that say appreciates military for bravery, lists unprecedented acquisition of military platforms, hardware in 7 years, says he inherited nation at crossroads with bombs going off at frightening frequency even in cities. Gbajabiamila commends federal government, armed forces. Can hails president, security agencies over release, and military vows to track down train bombers. And below that story, you can actually see a pictorial of the president meeting the freed abducted train victims in Kaduna yesterday. And these are some of the stories on this day newspaper.
All right, now let's look at the Guardian newspaper. The lead story on the Guardian says Tinubu returns, Obi in Harvard, PDP seeks urgent solution to crisis. The writer says Tinubu to address APC campaign crisis. Rivers Assembly derecognizes Atiku's ally, Omehia, as former governor. Atiku will win by 7 million votes margin, Ayu boasts. And then you'd have other stories. Above the lead story, hunger, major cause of insecurity, says Afe Babalola. FG blames fuel crisis on flood amid new regulations. Man condemns invasion of Kogi, moves to recover Dangote cement plant. And then you have also 2023 polls. Northern Khan accuses APC government of using hunger poverty against Nigerians. You'll also see the story that says, despite multiple checkpoints in Seme route, many travel in and out of Nigeria illegally. So these are the stories on the front page of the Guardian this morning.
Up next is Punch. Budget reps justify 8.4 trillion naira borrowing, 6.3 trillion naira debt servicing. We have federal government reviews rail security. Buhari meets freed hostages. Court rules on ASU's appeal. Out of court settlement fails. You also have 82-year-old French writer wins Nobel Prize in Literature. Below the nameplate, which is just beside the nameplate here, CBN disburses over 2 trillion naira to 426 industries. And we have Kogi claims Obajana plant ownership. Dangote man kick. The lead story here says PDP crisis. Aggrieved governors report Atiku to BOT, list peace conditions. And we have writers here. Ex-VP reneged on post-primary promise to Wike. London deal, says source. Wike moves against Atiku's ally. Delists Omehia as ex-governor. Atiku will shock Nigerians, win with 7 million votes margin, Ayu boasts. They have excitement as Tinubu returns from UK, prepares for campaign. The pictorial there tells the story. And then Ogun monarch allegedly blinds a trader for dancing with Queen. We have Ogun tanker chased by miscreants, explodes, 3 killed, 12 vehicles burnt, and Abuja patrol scarcity persists. FG blames Kogi flood. And these are the stories on the Punch newspaper.
All right, on the Nation newspaper this morning, the lead story says, Buhari to military, replicate Northeast feat nationwide. President visits rescued train passengers. Train services on Abuja-Kaduna route return soon. And then you have also above the lead story, just above the lead story, it says Redeemer is Nigeria's best private university. Aisha Buhari Wike for conference. Other stories, I'm happy to be back, says Tinubu. These are the stories on the front page of the Nation this morning. All right, so let's get perspectives on some of these stories now this morning. Like we told you, Nuruddin Abdullah is here with us. Thank you again for joining. Now, quite interesting stories this morning on the front pages. Let's begin with the security issue. It appears that we are making quite, I would say, remarkable successes in recent times with the release of this, the 23 train attack victims.
Yeah, that's correct. After 6 months in captivity, I think, I think about 2 months or so ago, the CDS told journalists that they have reinvented their strategy, and Fortunately, after that, the CDS Irabo speech, we saw changes. Like in Kaduna, we saw the General Officer Commandant of the Wandif leading troops to Bernangwari forests. And the last couple of weeks, so many terrorists were either eliminated, arrested, victims rescued. We saw severally the general, the GOC, leading the troops. That's quite commendable. And even if you look at the most terrible area, the Abuja, Kaduna road, it has been populated by those special forces. And I think since the attack on the gas brigade around Buhari, Zuba, the Kuje prison, there was no major incident. So,
but it seems as if the responses of government to this train attack, looks different. We've had several abductions in large numbers. Some of them are still in captivity. Now we seem to have moved. I mean, except for Daily Trust, I'm not seeing any paper keeping track of what the students of the Birni Awuri still in captivity and all of that. And then no one is just talking about those ones. One of the students of the Bethel Baptist School still in captivity as well. And then perhaps some in the northeast as well that have been abducted. We seem to have moved on and then, forgotten.
Yes, you're correct. But the Kaduna Abuja train attack was different. Birni Yauri was not the first attack on a federal government school, right from, even public school, right from Chibok and what have you. More importantly, the effort made, like I said, after 6 months, they were abducted on March 28th, after the terrorist attack. The first attack, there is this saying that I am a moving train, I am unstoppable, or what have you. I saw a post recently, I said, oh boy, terrorists have stopped a moving train in Kaduna. So maybe you have to change that. So the government was embarrassed with this attack. It was unprecedented. It was the first a train was stopped. People were killed, dozens abducted, and they were in captivity for 6 months. The efforts by the CDS came belatedly, so to say. If they have adopted this measure long ago, wouldn't have reached this stage. And we hope that the CDS, because he was in charge of mostly this operation, is equally not forgetting the Birni Yauri girls and some other people, you understand?
Okay, well, earlier you actually talked about, seeing results after the CDS's, speech. Why do you think it took so long for the results to actually show?
If you follow all the media conversation, the military itself, there is this lack of synergy among them. Take, for instance, we're told, he said it in plenary, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps, Master Wasi, said that he saw a security report that the DSS have won. How many times? More than 40 times, if I'm correct. An impending attack on the Kuje facility. But no action was taken until the attack was done, was successfully executed in a justifiable manner. So that lack of synergy actually. But I think maybe with what happened with the Kaduna train victims and with what is happening around the Birnangwari general area, some part of Katsina, we saw effort combined efforts. Yeah, by the military, by the police, by the DSS themselves. So we hope this will be replicated in all other theater of crisis, so that we'll just say bye to all the conflict.
All right, there's another dimension to this. Certain revelations came out with the release of these 23 abductees, and it's not the first time anyway, since the operations where Tukur Mamu, one of the negotiators, was arrested. We've had several allegations. Now, one of the relatives of the victims yesterday also mentioned, as captured on our riders, that Tukur Mamu seemed to have sabotaged efforts by government to secure their release, perhaps much earlier, and all of that. So, do you think that maybe that's another dimension to this whole kidnap thing, issue of racketeering, or maybe compromising certain negotiating principles?
Yes, we don't have expert negotiators in Nigeria, unlike in some other parts of the world, because kidnapping for ransom is new in the country. That is one. And secondly, I think the lacuna created by the federal government created an aperture for the likes of Mahmoud to key in. And families of kidnapped victims are always agitated.
Perhaps desperate as well.
That's it, you understand? So they are going to do all they could within their power, because these terrorists, they are murderers. They can kill at will.
And some of the statements made quite indicting. It said that at a certain stage, the issue of money was not even there. The terrorists were not demanding money, but Tukur Mamu, was said to be the one to have introduced the issue of, taking money and all that.
Yes, I read that statement as well. But I want to say here that Tukur Mamu is not here to say his own side of the story and the reasons for introducing money. I am not speaking for Mamu. I'm not saying Mamu is clean. Perhaps they have been charged to court. All these things should be used by the relevant agencies to prosecute him if he found guilty. But what I'm saying here is this, from Mamu's revelations at that time, you understand, families were trooping to him, desperate. At that time, there was even any interface between the families of the victims and the government. Nobody was talking. We saw how the family members were demonstrating at the train stations in Abuja, and they had been dispersed by the police. Nobody was talking to them. So you can see the desperation. And these people were doing videos, flogging women, children, including 1-year-old, including a more than 8-year-old woman, you understand? So the agitation, the desperation will be...
actually said that was a bit dramatized. Said it yesterday, it was dramatized.
But the issue is simple. They were in the forest, and the victims are here. You only see the other side of that one. So Tukur Mamu had to come in. You see this, it's okay, and you know that people, when they are kidnapped, there was that. And at the beginning, you remember what Tukur Mamu was saying? He said that they are going to be swapped, and what if he has been outspoken. He said, but the government was not coming in. Now, maybe what the committee should tell us is what actually happened. Did they pay money? It wasn't a military operation. Why did it take them this long? If they know they can impanel a committee to go and interface with these people, why are not doing the same for the Birnin Yauri girls? They have been married up. So the whole thing, is the fault of government. If they have acted that fast, the likes of Mamu couldn't even have any leverage.
All right, Mr. Nuruddin.
To profiteer from it.
All right, I think we should move away from that particular story and look at other stories. Now, can you share your thoughts on the PDP crisis? You know, it's been one thing after the other. You know, Wike at the center of it all, and now we're seeing that all thanks to him, the Rivers Assembly is recognizing Omehia as ex-governor and asking for a refund of 600 million naira.
You know, that's very dramatic, you know, because, or rather, you know, the thing is, he's taking his PDP issue, you know, to a very, it's been childish. You know why? In 2015, it was the same weekend. Yesterday, they rely on the Supreme Court judgment that ousted Omehia as governor of Rivers, saying that he wasn't validly nominated through a valid primaries. And Amechi, who was even in Ghana, he didn't participate in the general elections, so he was installed. We're talking about 2007. That judgment was there when Wike became governor in 2015, and he wasn't in good time with Amechi. In order to spite Amechi, he, as a lawyer, he ignored that Supreme Court pronouncement and recognized Omehia as governor. And he hung his portrait at the government house. And he started paying him his pensions and gratuities. Fast forward to 2022. Omehia is now with another political rival of Governor Wike, like Amechi was in 2015, Atiku Abubakar. He used the instrumentality of the National State Assembly to recognize Omehia, relying on the Supreme Court judgment that he ignored.
In the first place.
In the first place. So this looks childish, actually. But by and large, the Electoral Act specifically states that we have passed the stage of substitution. If Wike defects, what happens to the governorship candidate he installs? The senators are out of it. He has to remain in PDP. If he rocks the boat, he will be the first to suffer from it because his anointed candidate will not make it. And whoever takes over, Rivers is not Nasarawa, it's not Yobe or Jigawa. Those trillions, maybe at the end of the day, he'll have to do the design anyway. So I think maybe he's doing all these antics, you know, to raise the stakes so that when finally things settle, you know, he will get a better part of the deal.
All right, now let's move on to another story. This time around, the flood situation in Lokoja is now beginning to have a widespread, or I would say a national effect, going by the recent statement by the NMDPRA, where they said that they are attributing the flood situation in Lokoja as part of the reasons why we are seeing queues returning back to the nation's capital here in Abuja and all of that. Movement have become very difficult, and one of that route is one of the major routes linking the southern part of the country to the northern part of the country and all of that. Now, are we treating this Lokoja disaster as a national disaster, you know, from what you're seeing?
It's not a Lokoja thing, maybe because it is important because you mentioned trucks. We can't trucks fuel to the federal capital. But looking at the mortality rates, other states suffer most, like Benue. Look at what happened in Jigawa. My understanding of the situation here is this. NIMET has been predicting this thing. Before I came to the studio, I overheard you saying that movement, it is not Bank of the Rivers. No. It's zero absence of municipality development agencies across most of the state capitals. Some of them have been abandoned during the colonial times. And that's the situation in Lokoja. We always talk about Lagdo Dam, and what have you. That's not it. Go to Kano. You remember what happened in Kano? We had our own bout in Kano. Because
but this time around, the flood situation seemed to be more unprecedented, you know, unlike what we have seen in the past. There are those who are saying that, there are some people who are saying that the case in Lokoja is perhaps even worse than what it was in 2012.
Yes, why?
So don't you think that there's a you know, the dimension of the climate change situation, or perhaps maybe the overflowing of the riverbanks?
It is not the overflowing of the riverbanks alone. The disruption of the municipality system. There is zero municipality, whatever, in Lokoja, just like we do in Kano. Even drainages are not there. Population explosion.
Okay, now, but then aside, you know, setting up IDP camps for those affected by flood and also granting relief materials, what is the government actually doing that to make sure that, you know, this such a disaster doesn't occur again?
How many canals do we have inside Lokoja? You know, Lokoja geographically lies within the river Benue, River Niger stuff. None. All available spaces where in case of emergency like this you can evacuate have been built upon. Just like Kano, you know what happened in contemporary? Canals built by colonial masters. Why would we have the shops? But the government was forced to demolish most of them. That's what Erufai is doing in Kaduna. It's difficult, it's hard, but it's the reality. Most of the state capital, go to Benue, Makodi, it's the same thing. Zero municipality stuff. Every available space has been allocated, corner shops, and what have you. So when something like this comes, what happens? In Kano, for instance, now where are you going to evacuate to? Even in Lokoja. Lokoja is not as populous as Kano, for instance. Where are you even going to? None. When you know you are geographically disadvantaged, if I use that word, you have to make arrangements. That was why, look at the hurricane that is happening in the United States. Look at the casualty. Very insignificant figure because people evacuated.
All right. Okay, before we leave, because of the time, let me just quickly get your take on this. Some youths in Ibadan are protesting and demanding the what do you call the dissolving of EFCC. Yesterday I saw the story and I was really wondering. They want EFCC disbanded. They want EFCC
just like
and all that. So when I saw the story, I was like, "What's this?" Can you let me get your take on this?
That's not the first time that is happening. In 2003, if I'm not mistaken, during the Obasanjo time, EFCC operatives were attacked in Plateau when they went to arrest Darie. You remember, not even arrest Darie, to arrest some key officials in Darie's administration at that time. I remember it was Ribadu that was the chairman. There was a media war. Darie at that time was even saying that we are, is it Tarok, he mentioned, and I'm still going to Plateau. He said we eat dogs. He said Ribadu sent dogs to Plateau, but not knowing that here we eat dogs. You don't forget, during Eradua's time, when Eradua wanted to arrest, EFCC wanted to arrest Ibori, they were even calling for the disbandment. That's even a lighter or something. EFCC officials were attacked by militants. Gunfire. So it's normal. Thank God, thankfully, Darie, who EFCC officials were being attacked in Plateau, now is a free man by the same government that set up EFCC, by the same government that Article of Faith is fighting corruption. Ibori is back after his jail time in the UK. So it's understandable. When the late IG Tapabalogo was arrested by EFCC for corruption, traditional rulers from his area, numbering more than 17, stormed Abuja. Said, please release our son. He hasn't done anything.
So would you,
it's understandable.
Would you call this maybe corruption fighting back or something?
Of course, they were induced. You know, they are youths, unfortunately. Somebody who is being charged. The simple thing they will do is no media trial. Take him to court.
Okay, but we've actually seen cases where, you know, the EFCC in, you know, climes like Lagos and Ibadan, you know, force their way into people's houses to, you know, make arrests. Could that be one of the reasons, you know, when it comes to human rights, you know, at least we know that this is not supposed to happen?
We are talking about methodology now, methodology of arrest. And there is no smoke without fire. You're talking about this Yahoo thing. I think that's what happened. I think an actress, you know, took her to her Instagram, that she has been violated, you know, and what have you. But it's like, take NDLE for instance. Go to VGC, Lagos, Victoria Garden, whatever, Lekki, whatever. You see mansions, but you see the type of drugs that they have there. Tramadol worth 8 billion. A warehouse where we had 197 billion worth of cocaine. So, and you know, if your fundamental right is violated, you can go to court. EFCC is not above the law. If the procedure is wrong, go to court. But to call for it is disbandment. That's the most ridiculous, and you know they are youths.
But again,
5,000.
Well, anyways, let's just leave it to rest at this point because of our time. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak and bringing your perspectives. As always, quite interesting perspectives here. Our guest reviewer is Nuruddin Abdallah, editor 21st Century Chronicle, giving us perspectives on the dailies this morning. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, the program continues. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a look like this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA. To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve their sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news, or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
Good morning, Nigeria, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak this beautiful Friday morning. I'm Dashan Husseina Usman, and thank you for staying with us. I'm not alone in the studio as usual. Before we introduce him, remember we're live in the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning.
Well, for those of you who are just joining us, exactly. We are doing this for you. Of course, you're watching Daybreak. Right here, we are trying to bring you up to speed with what's happening and what you need to know to make the critical decisions as far as the day is concerned. Now, let's take a look at the headlines again. Amid face-off with Wike, Rivers Assembly moves to delist Omehia as former governor.
Reps disagree with Senate, approve 1.7 trillion naira for fuel subsidy.
Buhari visits freed train passengers in Kaduna Hospital.
And with that, we'll move on to the details of these highlights. A Rivers State House of Assembly on Thursday passed a motion to delist Sir Celestine Ngochim Omehia as former governor of the state. Omehia was governor of Rivers State between May 29, 2007 and October 25, 2007 when the Supreme Court sacked him. The court annulled Omehia's election, ruling that Rotimi Amechi, not Omehia, was the PDP's legitimate candidate. Amechi had won the PDP primaries, but the party substituted Omehia at the last moment due to allegations of graft. When Amechi became governor, he failed to recognize Omehia, but Wike reversed this decision and paid Omehia his entitlements as a former governor. However, the duo fell out in what is believed to be the latter's ties to PDP presidential candidate Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who defeated Wike in the primaries of the PDP. Representing the motion on Thursday, the House leader Martin Amaumule urged his colleagues to reverse an earlier solution of the 8th Assembly on June 30, 2015, which compelled the executive arm to recognize Omehia as a former governor and be accorded all entitlements, privileges, and benefits. The former governor was also directed to refund all the money and benefits accrual to him from the day he was recognized as a former governor.
All right, the House of Representatives on Thursday approved 1.7 trillion naira as subsidy for fuel in 2023, an amount which is at variance with the 3.6 trillion naira approved by the Senate on Wednesday. This followed the consideration and approval of the report of the House Committee on Finance, which worked on the 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure framework fiscal strategy paper as presented by Deputy Chairman of the committee, Saidu Musa Abdullahi. Although the Senate Joint Committees on Finance and National Planning and Economic Affairs, which worked on the fiscal document, had recommended that the cost of petroleum subsidy be capped at 1.7 trillion naira in 2023, the Red Chamber, during consideration of the report, upheld 3.6 trillion naira for subsidy as originally proposed by President Muhammadu Buhari. The House said that capping the cost of petroleum subsidy at 1.7 trillion naira in 2023 will enable the federal government to save the sum of 737 billion naira, which it said should be used to reduce the fiscal deficit of 11.3 trillion naira to 10.563 trillion naira. It also approved new borrowings of 8.437 trillion naira, including foreign and domestic borrowings, subject to the provision of details of the borrowing plan to the National Assembly.
And away from that story, President Muhammadu Buhari met with the freed 23 passengers of the March 28, 2022 Abuja-Kaduna train attack on Thursday. According to Malam Garba Shehu, presidential spokesman, Buhari met with the victims at the Nigerian Defense Academy Hospital. Shehu said before boarding NAF 001 back to Abuja from the Kaduna International Airport, President Buhari detoured to the hospital, where he also thanked Nigerian military for their brave services in securing the safe release of the hostages from Boko Haram terrorists. Shehu said members of the Chief of Defense Staff Action Committee, led by Major General Usman Abdul Qadir, retired, who facilitated the release of the hostages, was present at the hospital. Others, according to him, were Major General Adamu Jalingo, retired, Brigadier General Abubakar Saad, retired, Dr. Murtala Ahmed Rufai, Ibrahim Abdullahi, Ambassador Ahmed Magaji, and Professor Yusuf Usman, Secretary. The presidential spokesman said the Chief of Defense Staff, General Leo Irabo, had earlier introduced the committee members and briefed the president.
Now let's take a look at some of the packages we have lined up this morning. The Nigeria Labour Congress is staging a peaceful protest in solidarity with pensioners over their monthly deductions and non-payment of other benefits by the Kano State government. Trust TV's correspondent Idris Jibrin has more on this.
These are retired workers under the Nigerian Union of Pensioners drawn from the 44 local government areas of Kano State out on the streets in protest of monthly deduction of their pension and non-payment of other benefits.
Pensioners in Kano State from both state and local government areas are suffering from monthly deductions as a result of non-payment of their 100% monthly pension since January 2021, barely 20 months at local government areas, and state pensioners since March 2021, 18 months. With no cogent reason and with no hope to overcome the situation, despite several attempts by the Kano State Pension Fund trustees and Office of the Head of Civil Service to overcome the situation. Knowing fully that pensioners in the state have not enjoyed any pension increase since 2013, despite the implementation of the minimum pension and new national minimum wage in the country.
According to the Nigerian Labour Congress, many retired workers who depend on their pension for survival have lost their lives in the face of high cost of living, among other disturbances. The pensioners are therefore asking for the state government to pay their outstanding retired workers gratuity and stop the unnecessary monthly deduction of their pension as contained by law.
From January 2021 to August 2022, local government pensioners were deducted the sum of 2,573,9,049.61 out of their legitimate monthly pension, with a minimum of 13% monthly shortfall payments per pensioner in the months of October 2021 and a maximum of 26.2% in February 2022. While from March 2021 to August 2022, the sum of 906,917,595 naira 71 kobo, with a minimum of 2% monthly payment shortfall in the month of September 2021 and maximum of 11.2% in August 2022 from the state pensioners' monthly entitlements.
Meanwhile, the state head of service who received the pensioners at the state government house says that Kano state government has over the years remained consistent in paying the pensioners and that the problem of pension deduction arise from the previous administration.
The issue of non-remittance of monthly pension contribution for both employee and employer started right from the era of the regime of Malam Ibrahim Shekarau, and also it followed the successive regimes until today. The reason behind the non-remittance could be attributed to the fact that
Be that as it may, pensioners like this man who collapsed during the protests are pleading with the state government to look into their situation by settling their outstanding benefits as soon as possible. Idris Jubrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
Away from that story, before we move on to the next story, it's really sad, having to see what these pensioners are going through. Imagine having to work, for so long, your money is being deducted and being saved somewhere, pending when you're done working for you to reap the benefits of all your hard work. And then when it's time, there's nothing to show for it.
It's really sad, and it's really, really sad, really, because if you look at it, some of them, age is also not on their side. They've given their lives to service, and then this is what they get at the end of the day. If you look at it, they say usually age, old age comes with illnesses and all that, and so at that point they need maximum care and attention, even as children, but how would they do that without having the means to do so, and it's really very, very important that we take our senior citizens
very seriously,
more seriously.
All right, so let's move on to more stories. Hundreds of flood victims in Wuroboki, a border community of Adamawa and Cameroon Republic, say they are yet to receive any assistance from the government to help ameliorate the hardship occasioned by the flooding. The victims said the floods have washed away their farm produce, houses, and other properties worth millions of naira. Trust TV Salis Lawal visited the border community and filed in this report.
Even before the flood disaster, the victims, majority of them widows and less privileged, said they could barely feed as a result of the border closure. Madam Abari Omaru is one of the widows and also a victim. Her husband died and left her with 12 children and grandchildren.
I have lost my 2 farms as a result of this flooding. As I speak to you, me, my children and grandchildren sleep outside because our house have been washed away. We find it difficult to feed ourselves. The little capital that I have, which I do petty trading, is no longer available.
Despite this and other challenges, they said government is yet to come to their aid.
Nai masara, nai waike, nai sinkapaduka, bendoka kodeba. Gayara manna pamadesu, gana makarantama, sunsaya, bande kudi school fees.
Our condition here is appealing. Flood rendered us harmless. My children no longer go to school because I cannot afford to pay for their school fees. I don't have capital to trade anymore. As you can see, we sleep outside as the result of the flood. We are appealing to the government to come to our aid and help us so that we can feed ourselves and take care of our domestic needs.
Sometimes I shed tears when I look at these children of mine and grandchildren because of our situation. We have no one to assist us since after the demise of my husband. This flood has just added more hardships to our initial predicament. We really need assistance.
Meanwhile, the Executive Secretary of the Adamawa State Emergency Management Agency, Mohammed Suleiman, has assured of assistance to flood victims across the areas affected. From Yola, Salis Lawan, Trust TV News.
All right, now Nigeria has recorded a drastic drop in the cases of sea piracy since President Muhammadu Buhari launched the Deep Blue project in June last year. The Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, Bashir Jamo, said 34 incidents of piracy were recorded last year, but no attack on vessels has occurred this year. The NIMASA Director General updated newsmen at the State House in Abuja on the activities of the agency when he briefed them on Thursday.
The first thing that comes to mind when the DG of the agency that oversees Nigeria's maritime territory briefs is how safe are Nigerian waters? The DG's reply is very safe. He notes that piracy in the Gulf of Guinea has drastically reduced since the coming into effect of the Deep Blue project, and this has led to the delisting of Nigeria from the piracy red list of the International Maritime Bureau.
From the first quarter to date, we have never recorded one single accident or incident in our own territorial waters in terms of piracy attack. From last quarter of 2021 to date, over a year now, no single attack in our own territorial water. This led to the cancellation of the stigma placed on Nigeria as the most dangerous water and removed from the piracy list in March 2022.
This, he says, has largely contributed to the safety of the Gulf of Guinea, which accounts for 95% of global kidnappings at sea. The second question, of course, is what is Nigeria and especially the agency doing to stop the large-scale oil theft off the shores of Nigeria?
The Deep Blue project is, procured and commissioned to deal with the maritime-related crimes. And I made mention, as at the time of commissioning this project, we have priority to address the issue of piracy within and beyond our territorial waters. And we focus attention on that. Now that we succeeded to a large extent, we will now have to face the issue of oil theft.
If Nigeria continues to maintain the path of maritime safety, it could very well exit the list of countries which have to pay heavily on insurance before vessels visit their countries. To cap its operational achievements, NIMASA has improved contributions to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government from 31 billion naira in 2020 to about 37 billion naira in 2021. From State House Abuja, Kehinde Amodu, Trust TV News.
Well, tackling maritime insecurity is one tricky way of, tackling insecurity. Imagine having to do this on water. That's why you need a lot of skill, to be able to do that.
Yes,
it's quite different from land.
Yeah, and a lot of equipment as well, which is why I believe that this Deep Blue project has done a lot in that regard by providing the necessary equipment for the Navy to be able to deal with issue of piracy on our waterways. So it's very critical, and it helps business, the blue economy they call it. So business on the sea, it's really a cash cow. It's something that the government can actually make a lot of money from. But I mean, when you have piracy and security threats along that route, then it becomes very, very difficult to do that. So it's quite a commendable one.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the next story. The Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja has adjourned till Friday, October 7th, the ruling on an application of the Academic Staff Union of Universities filed to stay the execution of the ruling of the National Industrial Court that ordered an end to its ongoing strike action. A three-man panel of the Appellate Court, led by Justice Hamma Barka, said it would also consider the merit in ASU's request for leave to file a comprehensive appeal to set aside the NIC ruling. Trust TV's Aisha Salihu reports.
The Academic Staff Union of Universities, through its legal representative Femi Falana, notified the Appellate Court of filing an application for permission to formally lodge an appeal against the interim injunction that directed the striking varsity lecturers to return to the classroom. Though ASU earlier filed its proposed 14th ground of appeal, however, going by the provisions of Section 243, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, leave of the Appellate Court will be required for such appeal to gain validity. ASU maintained that its proposed appeal against the NIC order was based on grounds of law as well as on grounds bordering on fundamental human rights. The union said it is, however, willing to withdraw the application for stay of execution to expedite the hearing and determination matter.
We said that we had joined issues on that matter. We had filed extensive written addresses, and it should be dismissed. So the honorable justices took all the applications. Of course, we raised several other issues that his application was incompetent, he had approached the court with dirty hands, he had not evinced special circumstances and all that. We are saying it is not right to lock out our students who are not parties to this action while the matter is going on. We are also saying it is not right to lock down infrastructure. So much of investments that had been made in educational infrastructure several years that we have been a nation for 8 months.
Representative of the federal government, James Igwe, opposed ASU's application, even as he urged the court to dismiss it for want of competence and jurisdiction, as striking lecturers were yet to obey the order of the industrial court that was made since September 21. On the creation of the Congress of Nigerian University Academics, Falano said the law does not recognize the newly created academic union.
We're going to file any moment from now. The law is clear on classification of trade unions. As far as the law is concerned today, there's only one union for our members of academic staff in all Nigerian universities. Once a union has been recognized to represent a particular cadre of workers, you cannot have 2 or 3.
After the 3-man panel of the appellate court led by Justice Hamma Barka had listened to both sides, it adjourned the matter till Friday, October 7 for ruling. Aisha Salihu, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right, thank you so much, Aisha Salihu. Now we'll take a short breather, and then when we return, we'll take a look at the
Nigerian story.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. And right now we'll move on to our discussion for the day. And we'll be talking about human rights abuses and violence. Now today we're examining the recent human rights abuses and violence in Nigeria. And there are millions of ordinary people affected by conflict in Africa whose stories are missing in the mainstream media. Women and children have experienced different forms of sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria, and statistics show that 6 out of every 10 children experience some form of violence. 1 in 4 girls and 10% of boys have been victims of sexual violence as well. A UNICEF report revealed that children who reported violence, no fewer than 5 out of 100 received any form of support. Now this brings to mind the recent murder of the producer and 3 others who were found soaked in their blood in Gwarimpa, Abuja a few days ago. In Nigeria, child sexual abuse is an offense under several sections of the criminal code as well. But it is a different story for Khadija Adamu, a 3-year-old girl who was raped by a 49-year-old married man, Baba Idi, who has been arrested by the police in Kano State, not forgetting the case of Hanifa Abubakar, the 5-year-old who was kidnapped and killed by her school teacher. Now we have in the studio, still joining us, Nuruddin Abdullah. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
And we also have in the studio, Folarinwa Aluko, a legal practitioner and partner in law firm of Truman Rockwood Solicitors. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I mean, quite a sad experience for some of the victims of this violence in recent times. And, it just raises a lot of questions as to why do you think, if I may start with Barrister Folarin, why do you think that it has become so easy for people to engage in crime and, hurt other people or kill other people in the country recently?
That's a very interesting question, because I think it's a question that requires want to take the psychology of the general population into account, and then of course you also have to look at law and law enforcement as well. In terms of psychology, I think in the last couple of years we've seen what you may call a reduction in the value of human life, or in the perception of the value of human life. And I think that, to a very large extent, is reflected in the news. Well, it's not the news, but it's the reportage
of, you know, the loss of life from whether it's the bandits, kidnappers, you know, or any of the various other elements. And of course, this is also heightened by the fact that social media has made this information accessible and available to everybody at all times. You know, so I think to a large extent, there's this at the back of the minds of most people. It's almost as if a lot of people have been numbed. You know, on the flip side too, the question of law enforcement, of law and order now, also plays a role, because one of the reasons why we have laws is to social engineer, so to find bad behavior, identify it, and then stop it. And one of the roles of our criminal law, our criminal justice system, is to also nip these antisocial behavior, and provide some sort of justice for the society, justice for the victim, and then of course also justice for the perpetrator as well. So there's a question as to, on the one hand, as you said, we've seen an increase. What's the psychological impact of that increase because one could also argue that it's not just an incidence of an increase in the number, but there's an increase in awareness now. So what's the impact of that increase in awareness on the individual, the average Nigerian? And then number two, what's the response of, or how are law enforcement agencies responding or reacting to this increase, you know, in the form of enforcing the laws that we have on the books, you know, and specifically our criminal laws? How are criminal laws being used to catch perpetrators and then, if possible, prevent crime?
Earlier you talked about, you know, finding bad behavior, identifying it, and then stopping it. But, you know, how can the law enforcement actually stop, you know, such bad behavior when they don't even know who the perpetrators are? Like in the case of, you know, the 4 friends in Gwarimpa.
Yes, that's a fantastic question. And I think it goes to it's the function, one of the reasons why we have our criminal justice procedure laws is that the laws also, they don't just provide for, you know, a lot of the time what the public sees is the end of the process where somebody is charged to court and then, you know, the court process takes its course. But then before that, the law also provides for the process of investigation and, well, what you may call investigation and some sort of analysis, if you may. And that also includes a forensic process. The investigation process is based on intelligence, and that involves the society, the community as well. So, I mean, it's a very interesting interplay of several forces. So, on the one hand, I read about the Gwarimpa incident, and, you know, while I was a member of the Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee, you know, in the FCT here, and in one of the conversations that we had on that committee was the process. How does the police force, for example, how do they buy in, or how do they gain the trust of the people in different communities in the FCT, such that information that is, you know, information relating to crimes are provided by people without any fear, you know, of blowback or whatever. And so the first thing is there has to be trust between the police and the people in that community, because these people came in, I mean, I read the story. They came in, I think there was a security person to the, you know, so these are people that can be identified. There will be cameras, perhaps, you know, around. I mean, they must have come from somewhere, and they went there, did whatever, and it was a very harrowing story. Yes, but the basic idea is that intelligence is the basis for the investigation process. It also means, I mean, there's a huge conversation about the police procedures and all of that, but I guess I'll just say intelligence.
All right. Let me throw this to Nuruddin Abdullah. Now, to be able to, curb crime or control crime, at least the judicial system is very critical. But if you look at the processes involved of seeking justice in Nigeria, how accessible would you say that the judiciary is to the ordinary person? So, for instance, you are a victim of one crime or the other, but how easy is it for you to actually access justice if you look at the processes that we have right now?
It's not an easy one. And more importantly, even before the judiciary, he spoke about intelligence. Is the police capable of investigating these crimes? Not long ago, I think within this Otako general area, there was a robbery attack in some apartments. And luckily there was CCTV, and culprits were identified and arrested. That is one. Even if every street is CCTV, to put it that way, you don't have a database of the people that commit the crime. It's a simple thing. He moves from Abuja to Jos, Borno, out of you, he's gone. But if, for instance, we have a database, a central database, that every single individual in the country is there. Facial marks, people that we see on movies, you identify him. You understand? That is one. And secondly, the police is grossly incompetent. I'm sorry to use that word. Grossly incompetent. Look at how they even treat crime scene. Even our movies, you know, very childish and whatever. They come to the crime scene and tamper with it. I don't know whether that thing has changed. The police has only one forensic lab based in Lagos. So we're talking about fingerprinting. There is a crime here, and the police came bare-handed, and they tamper with the entire scene. You understand? That's true.
So the issue of incompetence, is it as a result of funding now, or what, or lack of equipment?
Can they handle the equipment? Look at the characters we have on the streets. The recruitment process of the police is the beginning of the problem. Even criminals have been hired as police. Zero background check. In some garden, let me use this. A residence, a house belonging to the former President Goodluck Jonathan, was ransacked. By the same police officers who were deployed there to protect the house. They sold even his underpants and that of his wife.
In fact, yesterday I was seeing a tweet by Sheikh Hussaini where he said the former Vice President Namadi Sambo's phone was stolen, you know, at an event somewhere in Kaduna.
So what I'm saying here is this: a lot needs to be done. The judiciary is the last bus stop. I'm not speaking for the. I'm not saying that the judicial system, you know, is perfect, but the judge is there. The judge cannot be your witness. You have to prove your case. And again, if you are poor, let me cite an instance, a case being pushed by Daily Trust in Sokoto, the Sokoto girl, which one Randy hit a wrong guy, hit with a car, and she lost a limb. It took journalists to do multiple stories to even bring the guy into custody. The guy was not even arrested because his family, he belongs to a family, they were higher up. So all these are the issues. The judiciary is the last bus stop. Again, let me give you a simple example. When this Yoruba agitator, what is his name? In Ibadan, he's now in Benin, right? Igboho. You know, when the DSS raided his apartment, they arrested some people, his boys or whatever. They were arraigned here. There was a report, media report, that the prosecutors of those in his associates, you know, the case was told, they came, they were not there because they said that the case file was stolen when they boarded along a taxi, even from Masaka and what have you. And the case file was stolen. And you know, they were facing terrorism charges. So this is just an aperture, you know, to how the prosecutorial issues, you know, are being done. The judiciary is just the last bus stop.
Okay, Barrister, now he talked about the judiciary being the last bus stop and saying that, you know, the law enforcement agencies or the police are incompetent. Now, what about in a situation where, you know, the law enforcement officers have actually done their job and it goes to court, the case goes to court, and these people are actually remanded in prison, but you have the prison wardens, you know, striking a deal with these people to pay a certain amount of money to leave, you know, the prison, the correctional facility, you know, and then return when it's time for, you know, the case to continue or the trial to continue. What about in such cases?
I mean, that's, we have all heard stories, you know, some of these stories, and the truth of the matter is, just as our guy here said, that there's a problem with our criminal justice process, and that problem is a multifaceted problem. Now, I was chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association, Abuja branch, and during my tenure, we engaged with the correctional facilities. I think it was even during my tenure that the names was changed from prison to correctional center. And so you find a situation where along the process, so there's a value chain, there's a criminal justice value chain that starts from investigation, you know, and ends with, is supposed to end with reform, because the objective of our criminal justice system is to reform, yes, and correct. And that's, I mean, it's reflected in the name, correctional. And so the process of trial, and in a hypothetical situation, the evidence has been gathered, the investigation conducted, the accused charged to court, or the defendant rather charged to court, and they're remanded, and then you have a situation where, you know, either for one reason or the other, you know, there's a leakage at the correctional center. I should state first that there are times when, you know, the right to personal liberty is a fundamental right that everyone has, even somebody who is a defendant in a criminal trial. Now, there are exceptions to, or there are times when that right can be, when the court can deny a person the right to bail, for example, or place conditions on which a person should be, you know, yes, granted bail. I should mention that there are instances where people are granted bail, and then, of course, the story that goes out is that, the person was released by a correctional center, or, you know, paid money to leave the correctional center. But I would say that at the moment, there is, if there are any credible reports about such, of course, yes, we all hear stories, you know, and in one or two instances, we've tried to find out the veracity of some of these stories, but we're yet to actually verify or have a, you know, an actually verifiable instance of such a situation. That's not to say that it's like the evidence of the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, you know. So it doesn't mean that that's not to say it doesn't happen. But we on our own part, the Nigerian Bar Association has made efforts to actually get one or two instances where, you know, to validate these stories. And like I said, I am yet to find any particularly not credible, but particularly verifiable instance. But in any event, I mean, because if the court denies a person bail on certain conditions, there's a presumption that, I mean, in capital offense cases, bail is not a right. It's not granted as of right. But in other cases, it's granted as of right. So in those situations, that the court would deny bail because that person is perhaps a menace to society. And so when it is found out that the person, the defendant, is actually out without being granted bail, then it's a huge problem, and it's something that our system should address.
All right, so how would you say that politics is impacting on the administration of criminal justice in Nigeria? I mean, we've had stories, like you said. We'll always hear stories, you know, how that some people are above the law, how that some people, because of political connections and all of that, they can go ahead and do certain things. I mean, recently, I've had cases where people are arrested in a particular place, and they insist that they be transferred back to a certain state, and all of that to be tried, and all that. So when you hear such stories, it raises a lot of suspicion and all that. So how is politics impacting on administration of criminal justice?
I think politics is a major factor in criminal justice everywhere across the world. I think we can start by laying that as the basic premise. And I'll reference you to the United States, for example, which is held up as the bastion for rule of law. And you have situations where I think the home of President Trump, past President Trump, was raided. There are allegations of criminal behavior here and there and all that. So bringing it back home to Nigeria. So I mean, there are complaints that there's criminal behavior in the corridors of power. Nothing is done about it. Now bringing it back home to Nigeria, one of the basic premises or tenets of the criminal justice system is that justice should be done to all without fear or favor. And it's part of the oath. It's one of the oaths, or it's one of the components of the oath, that the judicial oath that judges take. So it's that important. And the trust in the system is, it is built essentially on that premise. So the question now is, what is the status of our criminal justice system, the actors, from investigation right down to incarceration and correction? And you will find that, quite unfortunately, the police should be at the center. The police really, in any country, is the central point of the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, our police force has been emasculated to a large extent. You find that many of their powers have been stripped away or have been, decapitated, if you may. You have, of course, the Road Safety Corps. You have Civil Defense. You have so many agencies playing out some of the roles that the police should ordinarily play. And then, of course, talking about hiring, within the police, the process of hiring, recruitment, of discipline. The Inspector General of Police, for example, cannot discipline senior police officers. That has to be done by the Police Service Commission. And then there are issues between, there's the Ministry of Police Affairs, there's the Police Service Commission. There are many issues.
That also leads us to another issue. I mean, in recent times, we've seen that conflict between the Police Service Commission and the Nigerian police and all of that. And sometimes, it comes even to the public glare, and it becomes very embarrassing. Issues as simple as the issue of recruitment, discipline of officers and all of that. How is all of that impacting, on these things that we're talking about, criminal justice?
Okay, I think very briefly before I comment on this, let me just go back to what my learned colleague said. Let me just give you one instance. A Yahoo boy serving term in Kirikiri maximum prison. From his prison room, pull up a $1 million racket. While serving there, his wife gave birth twice. The story was that he has a hotel that he goes in Ikeja and he doesn't, and comes at will. So that's for the correctional service. I think on the issue of discipline, hiring, and what have you, our situation is not any different from what obtained elsewhere. The Department of Justice in the United States is responsible for the FBI itself. You understand? So I don't know why ours is different. It's simply because of corruption. And imagine this. Do you know why there's that sort of a separation of powers? Because of efficiency. The racket in the police anywhere in the world is not a one-man thing. It's more or less like a cell. It's a system. The boss is aware. He has his court. So how can you discipline an officer? Let me start an instance. When the DNDLEA indicted Abakari, our super cop, our Robin Hood, our Jack Bauer, a committee was set up reluctantly by the office of the Inspector General of Police. He reports to the Inspector General of Police. That is, what do they call it? Inspector General of Police, whatever. The DIG is late now. What was the verdict? Despite the overwhelming evidences presented before them, what they were even doing was just to derank him, I think, a step on the law. When they brought the report to the Muslim Smith-led Police Service Commission, and even the Minister of Justice, they said that the Attorney General was very angry. He said, what is this? They didn't touch all the hush puppy issues, all the issues with the monies even found on the younger brothers, on Carrie's younger brothers. And the boy was not even invited. More than 400 million. He has no pure water factory address. He is not a terror.
Okay.
You understand? So finally, what happened? They whitewash him. You understand? So it has to be, it took the intervention of the Police Service Commission and the Ministry of Justice, to even bring him to justice. So that is why you can't leave justice and disciplining and what have you in the hands of the police.
All right, Barrister, let's talk about, violence and abuse against children or minors. We all know the story of Hanifa. We all know the story of the 3-year-old girl that was raped to death, by her 49-year-old neighbor. And then, the lady in Anambra who had, a child in her care and she beat to death and dumped her body in the bush. Now, what special procedures or instruments are there for the protection of children against, such abuses or violence?
I mean, these are very terrible situations, to hear about. First of all, I think the basic premise is that our criminal code has provisions that protect people from, or that at least provide some sort of criminal redress. In addition to that, we also have the Child's Rights Act, which happens to be a law that applies within the Federal Capital Territory. But then, as a function of advocacy of organizations like Clean Foundation and co, has been domesticated, if you may, within most of the states. I think at the moment there are about 5 states that have not domesticated the child's rights, that have not enacted their own child's rights laws. And now the Child Rights Act and various laws create special rights for minors, for children, and I think one of the first things that it does is it defines who a child is. And I think, for the longest time, that was one of the biggest problems that we had in our jurisprudence, especially with regard to the protection of minors. The definition of who is a minor, who is a child. There are different laws that define the age of majority for different purposes. The Land Use Act has its own definition. And different other laws have their definitions. The Companies and Allied Matters Act has its own definition. But what the Child Rights Act seeks to do, or what it does, is it creates a blanket definition, which is anybody who is below the age of 18. And that's a very, very major point. And then, of course, it also provides for additional rights, the right to security, the right to education, and so on and so forth. And I think then we also have the Violence Against the Person Act, which has also been reenacted in almost all the states. I think, I'm not sure of the number, but about 8 or so are yet to fully domesticate it. So I think in these situations, the perpetrators, should be, and rightfully so, charged in consonance with these different laws, because the child rights laws, where they apply in the states, I think of the 5 states that have not domesticated, you have Bauchi, Kano, Zamfara among the 3 states. There are 3 among the 5 rather. But from the states where these laws have been domesticated, and reenacted, the perpetrators should be charged accordingly. And again, it's really unfortunate to hear of these situations. In one of the cases, the girl, the victim, there was a parade that was conducted, and on seeing according to the reports, on seeing the victim, she began to she panicked, and started screaming, and then from there she fainted, was rushed to the hospital.
Okay, so let me just interject here because of our time.
Okay.
We've heard reports about the reluctance of governors signing death sentences. Now, some of these cases, there have been court injunctions to that effect. there are certain death sentences that have been issued by the court and all that. But when it gets to that level, and the man who is supposed to append his signature to ensure that justice is served is not doing so, what then happens?
The death sentence is a very political issue, and it's not political within the context of Nigeria alone. I mean, it's political within a global context, because to a very large extent, there are several movements across the world that are against the death penalty, especially when you look at the general trend of human rights and on a global level now. And so you find a situation where even when the courts, pronounce the death sentence, the governors, because to avoid, having to appear before the International Criminal Court in the future.
But these are the laws.
Yes.
And until they are changed, they remain the laws, isn't it? Maybe Nuruddin will help us with it.
Yes, I think it is not only these cases he mentioned. Check the Hanifa case. Yeah, there was sentences and conviction by the court of the first instance. But don't forget that that case has to reach the Supreme Court. And minimum, maybe with now, let's say minimum 5 years. Minimum, beside on the average. More importantly, again, there are he said less than 5 states have not domesticated the Child Rights Act. But even though that they did, the enforcement is almost nil. Minus Lagos. I stand to be corrected. Lagos has special courts. You remember that Yoruba actor, whatever?
Yes.
Baba Ijesha.
A speed, the speed up, there are special
Again, that's another problem, the pace, of the processes. Again, is that something that also contributes to the issue of, the rise in the number of criminality?
Well, I mean, Mr. Nuruddin was talking about, I think in terms of the pace, there are a number of factors that determine pace. Mr. Nuruddin was correct in terms of the fact that Lagos has special courts, but I think the Baba Ijesha case was expedited also because of the media attention. So I think the media also plays a very huge role in fighting or championing these causes. I think also investigation is a major issue, because we're talking earlier about forensics, and that's why I wanted to bring up, I think it was Hanifa's case, the issue of the process of investigation.
Yeah.
In cases where the abuse is of a sexual nature, how do you preserve that? There are general rules. This is evidence that can be destroyed within the first 24 hours. So there are issues around the enforcing the laws in a way that ensures that you can protect the evidence where such abuse is actually recorded.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, we have to go. A lot to chew, really, but we have to go because of our time. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak. Folarin Aluko, legal practitioner and partner in the law firm of Truman Rockwood Solicitors, and Nuruddin Abdallah, editor, 21st Century Chronicle. Thank you so much again for joining. Well, that's our show for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms. Don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel and then watch us live 247. Thanks for watching. My name is Ayuba Ilya.
And I'm Darshan Husseina Usman. Have a pleasant weekend.